go, you put up that slide and hit broadcast. Wait for 30 seconds and then go.
Yes.
So slide, broadcast, 30 seconds.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so just so everyone gets that, I think that's pretty clear, but we'll just have the first 30 seconds be silent while Denise is getting all the live broadcasting set up for us, and then we'll jump in.
Sure.
And off, you might want to have that microphone a little closer to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah.
But I think a little bit closer.
Now? Is that better?
You have such an amazing pitch and cadence. We need that to come forward.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Don't be shy, my friend.
I'm going to send you a few more bottles of cinnamon, brother. Okay. I know what you're seeking.
Nice.
I know what you're seeking.
Can you tell we have fun on these things?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
Is this good? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect.
Perfect. Wonderful. Great. Can't wait. We actually have a common link, Nikolas.
We do.
Salvatore.
I know what. Yeah, really. You know, Salv. Okay.
Oh my God. You got to mention my name to him.
I will.
He'll tell you a couple of stories. We were part of a networking group called E2E in London. And him and I religiously turned up for every dinner. And after I looked at each other going, mate, have you got anything from this? He said, no, the dinner's good. I said, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. He's a character.
Great guy. You mentioned that you were doing this. I haven't, it's been a long time since I caught up with him, but before he was setting up Prospects. I don't know if it's still around, but.
Yeah, no, it is. It's part of our portfolio in the venture builder business.
Right. So he reached out to me when he was building it ages ago.
He said, Nick, I need an AI guy. He says, are you keen? And him and I just hit it off literally from day one. It was one of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to talk outside of this. We'll
we will. Yeah. Let's have a catch up with Self too. That'll be great.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Excellent. Tell us when you're ready to go, Rick. And,
okay. We have about 1 minute. So I'll hit the broadcast in probably 30 seconds or so, and then we'll do 30-second silence and jump in. Really glad. I'm just excited that you're here, Nick, and thanks for being.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah,
and
it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
So I'll take your cue, right? You'll intro me and all the rest of it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to hit the broadcast button now.
Let's do it.
Okay. And welcome to Straight Talk Live. I am your host, Rick Snyder. I'm the author of Decisive Intuition and the CEO of Invisible Edge. And I'm also joined by our fellow co-host, Af Malhotra. Af, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Rick. Welcome, everyone, for another fantastic Straight Talk Live. I'm the co-creator of Straight Talk Live and the co-founder of Growth Enabler, and had the pleasure to actually deploy AI in real life, yes, real life, for the last 5 years. So very exciting topic, and absolutely delighted to have our guest on today. So Rick, over to you, buddy, and let's crack on with this conversation.
This is one I've been very excited about. And just to give a little background for those who might be joining us for the first time, Straight Talk Live is really about the cornerstones of human transformation, digital transformation, and social impact. And so we look for topics, especially in a post-pandemic world, of looking at what are the questions we're forgetting to ask? What are the conversations we're not having? What are the ones we need to be having right now in different sectors of our society? And one of the ones that most excites me is this conversation around artificial intelligence. This was hot before, well before the pandemic. And it also just adds a whole nother wrinkle about what's actually speeding up, what's slowing down, what are the things we need to be discussing. And when I think about AI, I go to one of two places. One of them is more of that dystopian future that we've seen in our movies around Skynet and this idea of the robots taking over and AI being smarter than us in our own games. And there's a lot we can explore with that conversation today. There's also the other side, which I like to call Star Trek. And that is, how can we actually explore the universe even further together, where we're actually cohabitating and using each other for the best types of enhancements and ways of supporting what we do best. So that's what I know our special guest, Nick Kairinos from Fountech.ai, is really passionate about. And I know I've been in conversation with Nick for over a year or around a year or so. And I've just been blown away by what you're about to hear from Nick, from himself, just around where he comes from around AI. He's been in this field for decades, literally, and is still on the cutting edge and fringe of AI development and advancement. And he's based in Cyprus. And so without further ado, Nick, welcome to our show.
Rick, thank you very much for having me. Welcome, everyone. I've been looking forward to this for over a week now. I'm Nick Kairinos. As Rick said, I've been in AI for going on 39 years now. So it's giving away my age a little bit there, but been at this for a long time. I've seen the winters, summers, springs, and falls. I run a group of companies called Fountech.ai. We're active in a number of areas, one being AI R&D research, trying to move the state of the art beyond where it is now. So I refer to deep learning as a blessing and a curse. What comes next? What comes next is going to enable the next level of AI. So we're working on that. We have an AI consulting business, an AI software development business, and probably the one I'm most passionate and excited about is Fountech Ventures, which is our venture building business, which is really it's an incubator, it's an accelerator, it's a early stage VC, it's a venture builder, and we take entrepreneurs with phenomenal deep tech AI ideas, and we help take them from literally an idea and a guy or two, a gal or two, and take them all the way through to Series B, literally as corporate co-founders. So that, in a nutshell, is what our company does and what I do.
Well, thank you for being here, and let's jump right in. So, Nick, what I'm most curious about first, just to kick this off, is obviously this pandemic has interrupted and shifted everything, and it has exposed where infrastructures are broken, supply chains aren't working. There's so much need for better integration in systems and different approaches, radical approaches. What are you seeing in the AI fringe right now? What are the conversations that are having with other AI architects, designers, creators? What are you noticing just in terms of what is this pandemic exposing, and is it accelerating the need for AI? Is it pausing? What are you seeing out there?
Well, I think the immediate reaction is, first of all, a number of projects are continuing. So those initiatives are ongoing, right? But I think the pandemic has caused decision makers in the space to pause and ponder. And this is the largest experiment literally in every discipline you can possibly imagine, including human resources, workforce automation, management, et cetera, et cetera. So what's happened is that we've been forced to work remotely, and that's exposed weaknesses. Zoom's great, but it has limitations. And people are thinking about, what do we now need to do to cope with the new reality? So there's a tremendous amount of conversation going on. And we're getting towards the end of the pondering, but I'm seeing a massive wave of AI development and innovation happening on the tail end of this pandemic. And also, you've got, because of the sort of force move to digitization, that translates into a tremendous amount of data being gathered and a tremendous amount of knowledge being created through these experiments that are happening. So all of that is going to translate into additional AI development that wasn't even considered before. So those that are on the fence are going to get off the fence and move forward. Those that were on the fence about remote working have been forced to get off the fence. So it's kind of just, it's like the world has just given us this little nudge to say, take the next step. Let's do it. And that's beginning to happen in a big way.
And Nick, so what you're saying is there's going to be a rise in AI. There's going to be more AI, whether you're the employee in a large organization or you're the leader in the organization, you're going to turn to a lot more automation, a lot more insights. You're going to be using wonderful new technologies to make things better, faster, more efficient, right? Because
yeah,
of where we
absolutely.
are. So that brings us back to the question, and I must ask you the question because there's going to be many of us who haven't played and enjoyed the benefits of AI, or been on the technical side and or on the frontline deployment of AI. And so for us, some of us out there, AI is this kind of black box of opportunity and threat, and hence some people see it as one of the biggest game changers and enablers in our lives. We've already experienced AI through Facebook and social networking sites. They use AI, have been for a long time. And actually, even the Uber ride that we all are so dependent on lives on predictive analytics, on AI, trying to work out what the ETA of the next drop-off is going to be, or your pickup is going to be. That entire engine lives on AI. So does Facebook. So does Insta, and all of these tools that actually most of us use. So the first question before we get into, is AI your best friend or your worst enemy? And we'll debate that, of course, is what is AI really? And if you could really keep it as clear cut and simple for us to explain to us, what do you think AI means? What is all of this stuff? And then we can talk about that, because I think we need to define it first.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say that the reason for the fears is that because we fear what we don't know. There is a big misunderstanding as to what AI is and what it can do, and that therein lies the fear. So your question is spot on. This is the thing that I'm trying most to get out there, to have people understand what AI is. And unlike a lot of other sciences, if you speak to 5 different experts, you're going to get 5 slightly different opinions. So my view is as follows. AI is very much a nascent technology. It's this vast ocean of uncharted waters, and that spans many, many disciplines, from computer science to mathematics, statistics, philosophy, and I could go on and on. What we have today, and I don't want to leave anything out, but if you look at good old-fashioned AI, statistical modeling, probability theory, and then the state-of-the-art, which is deep learning and its various derivatives, to me, that represents a drop in that ocean. We have a long way to go. So I refer to what's out there today as machine learning and deep learning, and I differentiate it from what AI is. But it is a subset of AI, and you're going to see a massive explosion, not just in the applications that are developed. So you mentioned a few, as in Uber, Facebook, that use AI in many ways. The next level, the next echelon of AI research is going to enable us to do things that we aren't able to today. And really what it is, the way I see it, if you're looking for a catchphrase, for me, AI is the ultimate augmented to human. So it's human augmentation. I don't see it as replacement. It's there to help us be more, be better, do more, do better. And that is what our mission is. And a lot of my colleagues in the space feel the same way. It's not to replace humans in any sense.
And I guess we could, and thank you for that. And I think we should, to supplement that point, we should also talk about the fact and just make it super clear that AI is not one technology, right? It is a combination of different technology types that have come together, almost meshed together to create this new superpowered technology. including things like machine learning that we've been deploying in our business for a number of years. It's a tech startup. Tech startups are pioneers in this domain, as you know. Neural networks, and we'll talk about these independently, natural language processing, not the NLP, that is the cognitive NLP that people do courses on.
Not that.
This is the technology NLP. And robotics, robotics, physical robots, as well as this concept of robotic process automation, using, frankly, repetitive tasks, terribly boring tasks that no one really wants to do in the 21st century.
And dangerous tasks that nobody wants to do.
Tasks, yes, which are picked up and given to a machine. And frankly, manufacturing has seen that years and years ago. It's just almost a new generation of technology that is so ubiquitous. It's not as if, it's not a PC. It's not, here is my laptop, that's a technology. It's omnipresent, it's everywhere, it's in every app, and it's in every tool, Zoom. In fact, McDonald's, an example is, I was talking about tech titans there right earlier on, which was the big technology companies we're all familiar with. But of course, if you look at traditional organizations like even McDonald's used to carry out these surveys, right? These manual surveys a long time ago to work out the family friendliness score of the restaurant, right? And you said yes, no, or maybe, and they said, oh, great, it's working really well or not. What do they do now? They actually crawl and scrape data from Twitter based on geolocation, and they pick up sentiment on the back of that technology. And that is infinitely more advantageous, faster, more accurate. And then they cut that data in so many different ways to give us better menus, better burgers, hopefully,
right.
Service that really inspires the customer to come back again and again. So there's so many different types of technologies that AI represents. One interesting thing for both Rick and I has been, when we started Straight Talk.live, we were thinking about the human, digital, and the social, which Rick talked about. And AI affects each one of them, right? It affects each one of them. Could you touch on, with the experiences that you've had, you've built AI tools, you're in the thick of venture investing, and of course, you would have had time in the corporate. How do you think someone should look at AI and human transformation? And what I mean by that is jobs, employment. Is this a good thing for people listening in, or should they fear it, purely from a human standpoint?
So I have my views on that are slightly different to most people's, right? I think that humans are, and I hate the word replaced, but AI is going to do the jobs we don't want to do. I see that being liberating. It's going to enable us to go and do the things we really truly want to do. So I'm often, asked this question at events, say sitting on a panel, and I'll poll the audience and say, who in this room would continue doing the job they're doing if they won the lottery tomorrow? And most people wouldn't. So is it jobs we want, or is it the ability to maintain our lifestyle, the ability to earn whether we're doing the job we're doing or not? And AI will replace many jobs, but it's going to enable us to go out and do the things we really want to do that are higher level, higher order things. And the second thing that's going to enable that is technology, not just AI, but all technology, is reducing the cost of almost everything. So the cost of housing is going to come down. Energy is coming down. Transportation, logistics, manufacturing. So we're going to need a lot less to live on. So you're not going to need the amount of money you need today. Therefore, you can earn less and do the things you really, really want to do. I see AI as a big liberator. And it's also going to enable people to go and, for example, there's a trend coming in a big way, I think, which is micro-entrepreneurship, which is going to be setting up little micro businesses using a lot of this technology that's going to be so easy to implement, that is going to enable you to have multiple streams of income. And an example everyone can relate to is autonomous cars, right? So Uber's going to have autonomous vehicles. You could have a car, an electric car, autonomous car, that's out there earning you money while you sleep. And that's just one example. Your son could use a robotics kit to create an autonomous lawnmower, perhaps, that goes out and mows the lawn of the neighbors and earns a bit of money. So a lot of things are going to happen. It's going to change the world for sure. I don't want to say that it's not going to happen. We are going to have to adapt, but it's going to be for the good of society and for the good of individuals.
Nick, let me get in on this point, because I think you're making some great points here about a lot of the upsides of AI and what's possible that's not possible today, that it allows for us to be working on those higher human evolutionary opportunities or self-actualization moments of what do we really want to be doing? What makes us, what I was thinking of is where AI actually forces us to look at what makes us more human. What are those areas that we can continue to develop, and strategically, emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, these types of things that AI can't quite do as well. So what does it, in a way, force us to get better at on our side of the street, if you will? But here's the other side of it too. Let's take something like surveillance. And so you shared an interesting story with me around the pandemic, that in Cyprus, when you have to literally text, I think, the government or some official body to let you know that you can go outside for an hour to, whether it's to the pharmacy, to a grocery store, to or even exercise. You have 1 hour, everyone in the household gets 1 hour to get outside, and you have to wait for permission to get accepted to go out by whoever's on the other side of that text, or whatever AI, if AI likes you that day or not. And so the question is, what are some of your potential concerns around surveillance, and how, while AI has these great upsides, there can also be some catastrophic power grabs and opportunistic moments that could be pretty scary also?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a concern of mine. The invasion of our privacy. I mean, not to pick on China, but what's happening there with sort of face recognition and sort of hyper profiling, policing through that kind of thing is a big concern. And I don't think most Western governments are going to go that route. In fact, I think California has already outlawed facial recognition, right? It's happening in Europe. So I think the checks and balances are there. Governments, companies, individuals are going to attempt to do things that violate our privacy and our human rights. But we have to keep them in check. And we have to speak up and say, no, that's not acceptable. There's a tremendous amount of work being done around ethics in AI. And I think there's going to be, let's be real here, there's going to be issues. There's going to be some disasters. There's going to be things that are going to go wrong. But that's true for anything. It's true for any field. But I think ultimately it will autocorrect. So is all AI created equal and for the good of all of us? No. But I don't think the problem is an AI problem. It's a human problem. It's the humans that create and allow and enable that to happen. So AI doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have, we're not there yet. We're nowhere near that. It's the humans behind it that need to be kept in check. And there are a lot of areas like that.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. For now, at least, we're the ones responsible for our own biases, because they say, data is only good as its source. And so if you look at our internet right now, and AI is getting data from our internet, we're all over the place right now. It's a mess down here. So, so your point taken. And yet here's one thing I want to get your sense on, is that when I talk to AI architects and designers, I understand there's usually two polarities going on here. One polarity is, how can we make AI more powerful, faster, more intelligent? And that's our only agenda. Then there's the other side that you mentioned around ethics, around, well, wait a minute, time out, let's slow down a moment. Who might get exploited by that technology? Who might be empowered by that technology? Let's have those conversations now instead of when it's too late. And there's this tension in the AI community between these two sides. How do you see that playing out when there's also an AI arms race in another way, when you have, you don't really know what's going on in China in some ways. No one really knows in some ways what's developing in China. And then you do know a little bit more about the Western world. How do you see that playing out, where a lot of unknowns around an arms race to get there faster, and this idea around, wait a minute, are we asking the right questions now?
Yeah, so you've got to find that balance between the right amount of regulation and the right amount of innovation. Because if you overregulate or regulate prematurely, you're going to stifle innovation. I think Europe, sadly, is out of the AI race. It's now really between China and the US, and I think that's largely to do with overzealous premature regulation before we fully understand all the facts. My view on how to address this, Rick, is that it all lies in how much autonomy and decision-making ability we give AI. And that is an area that needs a tremendous amount of work. Obviously, it varies by application, right? If, depending on the cost of lives, monetary cost, other implications, you give it less decision-making power. And a solution I'd like to see, and it's something that I work on, is I'm following the work of Neuralace, for instance, Neuralink, Elon Musk. There's a number of companies in that space. Kernel is another one that's doing a lot of great work with brain-machine interfaces. We've got to bring humans into that decision-making loop. The issue, though, is that human language is relatively inefficient. It takes a long time to communicate the information. Say, for example, the machine does all the number crunching, comes up with 4 plausible decisions it can make. That decision has a cost score of X, which is above the threshold. Therefore, it's not allowed to make that decision without certain humans, and depending on what the decision is, there's a set of rules that decide which group of humans can make that decision. And this should be crowdsourced. The moment the likes of Kernel figure out and crack the neural code where you don't need to have a 30-minute audio stream or video stream going from the machine to the human, where literally a series of electrical impulses communicates the options and then doesn't wait for a verbal response, but reads what's going on in the brain to say, is the reaction positive or negative? And based on that, go and make the decision. In certain cases, the decision has to be explicitly made by certain humans. So to me, the solution lies in building that bridge between human and machine, and then setting very, very specific rules and enforcing them as to how much decision-making ability does a machine have, including hiring, firing. I mean, there's a long, long list of decisions that we should sort of figure out, can it make the decision?
I just want to come, thanks, Nick. I want to come into touch on another topical issue related to AI. So we talked about the human side, and I think what I'm hearing is it's an incredible technology. It's powerful. You need to understand it better. You need to embrace it. It's already here. You're using it in different sort of guises. But at the same time, what you're saying is it's almost like, well, if you don't catch up, if I'm a worker in a company and I'm concerned about it, if I don't investigate, don't study, don't upgrade my skill sets, I may lose this race, and it might be a bit of a race. And in fact, we talked about the unemployment crisis literally 2 or 3 sessions ago, and it's a real one, and it's going to hit us. And people are thinking about the next job, the next career move, the next reset. And there's no doubt in our minds, I guess, that AI will have a role to play in whatever you end up doing next. If not now, then at some point in the near future. So you must understand it. It's like this new cool thing that you have to get familiar with and comfortable with, because it's going to be part of your new reality, right? We're accepting that to some extent.
Yep.
So I think we're a little bit biased, but we're saying we like AI because we enjoy it. We've used it in the right sort of way. There are some risks, though, that we should call out. And I think with anything in life, an overabundance of something in a short space of time. And a crude example would be alcohol. If you drink, we're talking about alcohol just before we came on. We're talking about single malt. If you consume too much too quickly, it's kind of not good for you, right? So I think AI needs a little bit of, you have to be somewhat timid with it and paced and enjoy it like a good glass of wine, or a nice sip of single malt, or whatever it is that gets you going. And it needs to be monitored. It needs to be watched, because we can get addicted to it, of course, because we can become a little bit lazy, because the machine orders the product before I think about it, God forbid. or the predictive analytics tool tells me how I should be feeling in the next 10 minutes based on past behavior analysis, God forbid, or not. And so human beings, yes, won't have to do the boring tasks, the things that actually, if you think about Gallup surveys for years, over 80% of people interviewed in enterprises actually, frankly, don't want to get up in the morning and go to work. Okay, why is that? Outside of politics and all of the corporate inertia that exists, it's the fact that people end up in groundhog mode. Same thing every day, every morning, leave work, leave for work at the same time in the morning, come back at the same time. It's that kind of almost boredom that sets in. And I think it's amazing that it's going to be amazing that AI takes all the stuff you never want to do, and now you can focus on higher value work. You can be transformational. And I want to touch on one very important point you made, which I think you said micro entrepreneurs. Is that what you call them? Micro entrepreneurs?
Yep.
And I think you're spot on, bang on. And I do think it's going to be a lively trend in sync with the gig economy trends, right?
Yep.
Because people would want to, and freelance trends, of course. And in fact, in my own company, most of our employee base now, in fact, they're not employees, they're all freelancers. We are massively dependent on the gig economy. We have a few people on payroll, but actually most of the people, majority, we want them to be gig economy workers, not just because of the cost advantage, variable cost advantage. They're dynamic. They're working on multiple projects at the same time, and they give us a lot of insights. Like the cross-pollination is super fair, as opposed to the employee who generally accepts it or wants it one way, right? So micro-entrepreneurship, just want to touch on that and get your views. Can you tell us a little bit more about open source? Because if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm thinking, well, how am I going to become rich then, Nick? Or how am I going to pay for my existence, although I don't need to earn as much as I did yesterday? Can you talk us through the opportunities around open source and AI, please?
There's a lot of points you raised there. So to respond to a couple of points you raised, right?
Sure.
First of all, we do need to understand what AI is capable of, what it can do. But the trend you're going to see over the next decade is that not only scientists and engineers will be creating AI, there's going to be a set of meta tools and meta tools that makes it easier and easier for you to develop stuff. So we're going to get to a point where a non-technical person can essentially use AI, for example, working from home as a micro entrepreneur, to spin out an e-commerce website in 2 minutes. And just by talking to a system that does everything it needs to do for them, right? So those are the enabling technologies that are going to enable this micro entrepreneurship trend. Another point that I want to get in here in response to what you just said and asked is that I heard on one of your recent episodes, you spoke about the UBI and how by paying people this handout, essentially, what is the motivation to do anything in life? I have a slightly different idea for how we handle that. So if you look at any organization, you've been in a Fortune 500 company for 10, 15 years, you're in that group of people who's just tired of the monotony. You're seeing your job being more and more replaced by AI. The way I think that transition needs to happen is that, first of all, there needs to be a mechanism that moves you from the labor pool to the capital pool. And the way I see that happening is that because companies are going to have a lower labor cost, less contributions to pension, et cetera, because you have a reducing number of employees, a portion of that money should be put in a pool that essentially enables employees that are on the path to redundancy and replacement to enable them to own a share of A, the company, but B, the underlying technology to an extent where when you leave the company, you've got some ownership, so you are going to benefit financially. You've also got perhaps a royalty-free perpetual license to use a lot of the tech, which, by the way, you help procure. You help create the data that trained it. You help supervise. You helped figure the company out how to glean insights from it and improve it, and so on and so forth. So you basically facilitated the AI getting to a point where it replaced you, right? So you should walk away with some ownership that replaces pension, where you earn money for the rest of your life as an owner of that company, plus you have access to the technology to go and do something that's non-competitive to the company you left. So that enabled micro entrepreneurship as well. So that is how and by the way, this is quite way off into the future, but we do need to start thinking about these things now and putting these mechanisms in place. And that's the way I would approach that whole dynamic that's taking place at the moment.
What about, so that's one part of it, and I love the idea where you're rewarding and recognizing those who were instrumental in the original creation, inception of probably a product that's making you millions, if not billions of dollars today, right? So that's fantastic. And that brings us to the point around ethics and values and how corporates actually run this show. And so let me throw another thing in the mix, and Rick loves this subject. Because it relates to human judgment, and it relates to intuition, it relates to compassion, passion, care, sensitivity, all of those things, which interestingly, humans and AI, human beings are gifted with all of those things I've just shared. We've got them in abundance. In fact, when you're a little child, you're bestowed with all those gifts, and along the way, we kind of lose them or forget that we have them. Isn't that the biggest difference between human beings and AI? Because of course, this debate's going to go on, but human beings are masters of all of those emotions, right?
Yep.
They can sense, they have context like machines don't. And isn't that what, in fact, that's not even a comparison. They're two very distinct, mutually exclusive things out there. And isn't AI now going to enable us all to tap into those great abilities, our gifts that we've forgotten we had, the love, the passion, the gratitude, the generosity that makes the world actually go round? Machines just act as enablers, right? They're not at the forefront of what humanity and human beings are able to do themselves. So I want to throw this into the mix, and I'm going to ask Rick to add some more sort of juice and masala to this, Rick, which is, man, human being, woman, we have other gifts. Machine makes our gifts greater. Let's talk about that, because I think this should take out anxiety and fear from the minds of those who are either going off on a mission to launch AI in some way in a big company, or are the recipients of AI, not victims, but recipients and benefactors of AI, if you want to call them that.
Yeah, great question. For me, digital transformation is human transformation. They are fundamentally related, even though we often think of them as separate a lot of times, or split.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the more our consciousness develops, the more our intelligence develops, especially in the areas, as you're saying, that make us most human. We've learned so much about emotional intelligence and how we're reading out signals and cues all the time. Mm-hmm. And think about anyone who goes into any board meeting or team meeting, you're already scanning the environment in the first second.
Yep.
You're tracking body language, even though you might not be aware of it consciously. But subconsciously, that's what we're doing as social animals all the time. Whether we're in relationship, whether we're in a one-to-many presentation or speaking opportunity in a big stadium, we're always feeling out the crowd, or a one-to-one situation. And here's where my book really came from, that passion around, we're much more intelligent than we give ourselves credit for. And yet we haven't put a lot of energy and attention on that. We haven't really put as much development on our intuitive intelligence. And Nick, this is where you and I think, first originally sparked. That's when right. You were talking about, and this surprised me when you first said this, that, hey, actually, you're not going to believe this, Rick, but a lot of AI designers and architects like me, we're actually studying consciousness. We're studying neuroscience. We're studying intuition. That's the things that we're wanting to learn to add to our repertoire to make artificial intelligence as synergistic as possible with the human dynamic. And it's like, you have to be able to study each of them to its extreme to be able to blend. And so that really gave me inspiration. And that's where I think we first touched around the human and the artificial intelligence, that how can we amplify both sides, which I feel like we're doing from different angles, but also complementary that way. Yeah, how do you see that, Nick?
So, as I said earlier, AI is there to augment human intelligence, to make us better, to give us access to more. But it's a symbiotic relationship. So a lot of people, the holy grail of AI is artificial general intelligence, right? That's when machines display all the traits of a human, and
how
at least
far out
human
do you
level
think we
intelligence.
are on that, by the way?
Well, here's a controversial view, right?
Yeah.
So looking out at the horizon, and we can only see up until the horizon. It's hard to see beyond. And who knows, maybe something will come along that enables us to see beyond what we can see on the horizon today. But my view is that AGI equals AI plus HI, where HI is human intelligence. And it's not just intelligence that we all understand what intelligence is, but it's also intuition. It's the ability to abstract. It's consciousness. It's emotion. And all those traits that make us truly human. And here's where the controversy comes in. I don't believe in, as far as the horizon, as far as I can see on the horizon, that we'll achieve AGI in our lifetime, except unless we merge man and machine, and going back to BMIs, where AI is able to emote, it's able to have intuition, but not without a partnership with humans. In other words, it outsources, crowdsources the strictly human characteristics to the crowd. So, for example, let's just say that an AI system has to show an emotion in a certain context, and the audience is young ladies under the age of 25 in Manhattan, for instance. There'll be loads of people in Manhattan that have signed up to be connected via BMI to this particular AI. What the AI system will then do is say, I don't know how to emote. I can pretend I know. I can basically predict what Rick would have done and do that, but that's not true emotion. You're not really exhibiting emotion. It can then poll the crowd and say, what do I do? Here are my options. I've crunched the numbers. These are the options. It gets that feedback, and now it's displaying emotion, but it's not coming from the machine as such.
Yes.
It's coming from having articulated that, crowdsourced it, gotten the feedback, and then shown the emotion. And the same goes for intuition, et cetera, so that the machine can develop that particular sixth sense, but it's not its sixth sense. It's coming from the audience, right? Or from the crowd.
Yeah, so it's still like a mimic effect where it's responding based on algorithms versus intrinsically arising.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get there in our lifetimes. I'd love to say we are, but I just don't see it. We can emulate it, we can predict it. So, for example, intuition, we could hook you up to fMRI, we could be with you for 2-3 months, and we could say, all right, just tell us what your gut is telling you in this instant. Now, are you able to tune into it? And are you able to articulate it properly? And are we able to then codify that into something that we can train the machine with? But presuming we can do all of that, we could then map out that, okay, in this scenario, based on all this data we've gathered, Rick's intuition's probably telling him X. But again, what are we doing? We're predicting based on the past, but we are so much more complex than that.
Well, let's find out. I think Nick is going to have a single malt whiskey after the show.
Wow. That's magic.
Wow. You heard it here on Straight Talk.live. I have one last question I'm just dying to ask you, then I want to turn it over to Off. Is, in physics, we have something called the observer effect, that when you observe a phenomenon, you actually change that phenomenon. And this has happened in so many experiments out there. There's loads you can research about this. I've never heard anyone ask this in an AI context, so I want to ask you this question. Is it possible, or have you seen any research about this, that the consciousness of the programmer alters the program, the artificial intelligence?
Yeah,
the level of consciousness of the programmer actually infuses and changes the artificial intelligent product?
Absolutely, and it's not just the programmer, right? It's the people gathering the data. It's the people that are cleaning the data. It's the people that are the data scientists that are preparing that data to feed the model. We are, every one of us, there isn't a human being on this planet who isn't biased. We all have biases, whether we like to believe we do or don't, and those will always make their way into any system that's developed. And within companies, the culture of the company, which, let's face it, today still, it's mostly, and especially in the tech world, it's mostly created by men for men. That's got to change, and that's just gender, right? It carries across to many other dimensions of humans. So absolutely, it happens in a very real way, Rick. Our beliefs and our consciousness and our biases will make their way into the systems we create, and therein lies a really exciting problem in AI, is to figure out how to use AI to filter out that bias. There's a lot of companies out there, and we see a lot of pictures of people telling us that they figured out how to remove bias from this and bias from that and bias from the other. And I've yet to see something that truly impresses me. We're not there yet. I mean, I have a number of theories. This is not a technical discussion, but maybe for another conversation, I'd love to do one with you about intuition and AI and how the two come together, and what does that look like? Because I have a lot of thoughts, and we're doing a lot of work in that area.
Would love that.
So I wanted to, and time's flying by, so we've got some questions that have come in as well. I just wanted to touch on one final point, and then we can have an open dialogue, which kind of relates to, so we talked about human transformation. We have touched on digital transformation, at least from the point of view of micro entrepreneurship, open source tools and software that will allow you to be an intrapreneur and or an entrepreneur. So an intrapreneur, someone inside a big company being entrepreneur-like, you know, and new kinds of business models we've touched on, not directly, but of course the Ubers, the Facebooks, the software as a service companies that we all kind of use as subscriptions, Amazon, Apple, and so on and so forth. And people cross-pollinating and entering new industries, even the big companies. That's the other thing to call out. Big companies, large tech titans, those are the ones to be really aware of. And you have to ignore them at your peril, because 4 weeks or 6 weeks ago, you know, at least in my world, we were propagating and making CEOs of large companies aware of the tech titans and their business models and their ecosystems and their unit economics and their hiring policies, the whole lot, because they're like the stalwarts, they're the marquee companies that one looks up to. And in the last, few weeks, 7-8 weeks since the pandemic, that entire talk track has amplified. It's on steroids, because Google has taken a massive position, not only in building new products and hiring people and so on, but actually it's doing in the United States, it's the company that has built the survey tool or the geolocation tool that you use to find out where the next testing center is for COVID, right? And they run that, they own it. And let's just imagine the kind of, God knows, terabytes of data that they're accumulating every second on the citizens of a country. So if you think they had power yesterday, well, there's another conversation to be had. The point I'm making really is that on the digital side, the big tech titans are going to be ones that we should all watch. And we have to watch them very carefully, because they're the owners of AI. Frankly, actually, they're going to own a lot of data if they haven't already, and they're going to be manipulating it and playing with it and creating predictive analytics. You know, going back to my Amazon experience, of course, I want the product to turn up before thinking about it, because I'm like, oh my God, it's my wife's birthday. Bang, she's got a gift already. It's turned up, and I'm in the good books.
It's coming, apparently.
So far, it's just me, and I'm grafting up. Convenience will always overshadow and dominate, or trump, pardon the pun, will always be at the forefront of human decision making, because we like things better, faster, easier. You know, be it the hospital experience, the hotel experience, or the home experience, doesn't really matter. or the education experience. So digital business models are going to change. AI is going to be a big part of them. Third area I'd like you to just very quickly touch on is social impact, social transformation. Now, come on. I mean, AI is all cool and so on, and people are going to make loads of money. But is anyone going to get anything good out of this? Is there any benefit for society with this cool, ultra sexy technology? Over to you.
Oh, gosh, I mean, there's so much of it's just, I mean, let's talk about education.
Yeah.
AI is going to be the thing that completely disrupts a century-old institution structure that simply does not work. The whole one-to-many teaching paradigm, just it's broken. There's a knowledge explosion. The amount of knowledge that's coming on stream every day is massive. How do we keep up with that, right? The whole idea of studying for 15, 20, 25 years and then never have to do it again for the rest of your life is nonsense, right? I mean, we're going to have to shift to a lifelong learning model. There is a dire shortage of teachers globally. You've got more and more people coming online. You've got, I don't know how, I think it's 1.6 billion children around the world don't have access to education, and a big percentage of that is young girls.
Yeah.
How do you fix that scalability problem? Only AI can do it, unless you can just go figure out how to clone a tremendous amount of teachers and let them live on a lot less money, right? If AI fixing that scalability issue in global education does not have a positive societal impact, I don't know what does. And you could translate that, you could carry that across to medicine, you could carry it across to a lot of things. There's a lot of people around the world who are not getting medical treatment. Sure, you don't necessarily want a robot who, is not going to have a great bedside manner, but I'd rather take a robot than nothing at this point in time, right? Or a machine making my medical decisions than nothing. So the positive societal impacts are numerous, and they run deep. Education is one that's sort of near and dear to my heart. It's hugely important, and it's one we're doing a lot of work on.
Terrific. Maybe we'll host another show at some point to talk about intuition and education and its intimate relationship with AI. So we know we've got a ton of questions. Rick, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, we got a couple great questions from our audience. And for those of you listening right now, type in your questions now, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we want to hear them. So here's your first one, Nick, is what do you predict the next big advancements in AI will be in the next 2 years?
Wow, there's so many. I think we're going to actually, although it seems like science fiction, I think we're going to start seeing BMIs being used to an extent where you start having more and more of a brain-machine interface. I mean, you're seeing it in gaming. You're already seeing it with in people with motor function issues. It's going to start entering our lives, and it's as soon as in the next few years.
And what are some potential playouts of that? What could that look like as far as helping people and collaborating with people in that way?
Well, education is one thing for sure. It's giving us instant access to everything that's online, and having sort of an unspoken conversational agent in our head that we can use to access knowledge and information. You could use it in diagnostics. I mean, the applications that are going to flow from that are huge.
I think the one thing I just want to add to that, for whoever asked the question, is that all of the big advancements that we may or may not see in whatever time period is going to be underpinned by data. The more data, the more clean, structured data we have about something, historic, ideally, data that can give us some sort of a baseline on how AI can be deployed in certain instances, the better it will be. Even a healthcare scan, like a radiology unit, would want to use AI to look for cancer cells, maybe, or preempt whether a patient's blood work is making them prone to an autoimmune condition, for that matter. Right now, it's we're using very basic models to do it in human judgment, the doctors or the experts or the consultants. And if you think about it, it's bizarre, because health, especially with this pandemic, and I think you're probably thinking this, but I would call this out. I think health has to be first and foremost in terms of how AI is going to change the way, God forbid this happens again, we will be using a lot more AI in either drug discovery, drug development, or deployment, or logistics, you name it. I think that has to be the one big advancement that's going to come on the back of this.
You're going to see a tremendous amount of that. I see it happening already, right from the papers that are being written to the applications that are being developed. We will know about the next pandemic on day one, on day zero, because we're going to see those initial spikes. You're going to see those initial anomalies, and we're going to go in and be able to deal with it a lot quicker. Drug discovery. I mean, there's so many areas. The one thing I tell everybody is that AI is not I don't see it as a technology on its own. It's the great enabling technology. It enables everything else to be better and to get to where they need to get to a lot sooner.
Correct.
Let me ask this question from Cameron. This is a good one around the environment, AI and the environment. Could it save our environment? How could it play a role in helping us with climate challenges that we're facing? How do you see that link?
Yeah, look, definitely in terms of gathering data and crunching that data and trying to make sense of everything that's happening on this planet. Already there's a tremendous amount of initiatives happening in the climate change arena. And I think with the lockdown, the amount of data that's going to flow from us mostly being stuck at home and not being out there polluting as much and doing things, that's going to be a huge experiment that's going to lead to a tremendous amount of insights and knowledge and innovation that's going to come from that. So AI is one of the areas, climate change is one of the areas that I think AI is best suited to deal with.
I feel some relief as you say that. We need all the help we can get.
Oh, absolutely. We've kind of taken our eye off the ball with the whole pandemic thing, right? I mean, we've kind of left climate change to the side a little bit, but
exactly. But as we all know, there's the longer term conversation that's not going away that we'll have to contend with.
Yep.
So BB asks around deep learning. So deep learning is modeled on the human brain. Where else can we look beyond the brain?
Okay. Well, firstly, yeah, it's sort of modeled. It's neuroscience inspired, but let's be honest. We understand the brain anatomically, but functionally, we actually know very little about the brain, relatively speaking. So deep learning is, I don't believe is modeled on the brain, but let's leave that as it is. I think that we need to be looking at completely new paradigms. Trying to model the human brain is something that I don't believe is the best way to do this, right? The best way to create AI. I think we need to be starting on a tabula rasa, complete clean slate, and be looking to have AI do what it's good at, what machines are good at, which is crunching huge amounts of data, finding patterns in obscurity, things that humans are not good at. Trying to create another human is not the best and highest pursuit, as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I really like that. I haven't really heard anyone phrase it that way. That it really could be created in a whole different context, not based on the human hybrid that it is now, even though it's hard to imagine that really happening at the same time.
Well, I mean, we're doing a lot of work in that area. And I think you're going to see more and more people doing that. We have humans, we have very smart humans. Why go create another human? This whole anthropomorphic aspiration just doesn't make sense to me. You know, why make robots look like people? Why make humanoid robots so that we can relate to them? There's more efficient designs depending on what the objective is. And there's more effective cognitive designs than modeling AI after the brain. So this can get into a very heated debate if you bring 4 or 5 AI practitioners into the same room and have this discussion, because everyone's fixated on the sort of neuroscience inspired model. I think it's important to study it so that you can have that sort of human machine partnership that I keep talking about.
I have to say, I'm starting to get convinced with your earlier argument there and your point, because at the end of the day, I mean, technology is technology. It's there, created by man, by human beings, by us, to serve a purpose, to make life better, to do things faster. to take away the boredom or the tasks we don't want to do, whatever it may be, whatever the deployments may be. I think, I mean, Hollywood has a role to play here as well, of course, because Hollywood has given us the movies from Star Wars to Star Trek to various others, where you have androids, human androids, and you have robots who look like us. And there's so many sort of examples we all have of how the world could be different with so much more technology. But you make a really good point. I mean, I just being very pragmatic. If you think about the power of compute, the computational power with supercomputers and just like terabytes and terabytes of data now we have on our fingertips through the cloud, that is what we should be exploiting for the foreseeable future to then allow us to, I think think tanks need to come back. We need to start to think about the new paradigm, the new world we all want to live in, not just solving the immediate problems and being so task oriented. And one of our speakers down the line, who's a fantastic, he's an intellectual economist and general maverick, Charles Eisenstein. We're bringing him on in a few weeks, right, Rick? And we were chatting with him just the other day, and he used this concept. I liked it a lot. The tyranny of the clock. The tyranny of the
Love
clock.
it.
And I've been thinking about that overnight, and I'm thinking, wow, we've really been stifled and dominated and ruled by the tyranny of the clock in everything we do.
Absolutely.
And let's be aware of that. Let's not start yet another form of tyranny. And so I'm on your side. You've convinced me in a few words that we don't need man and machine meshing together. I wouldn't mind a chip in the back of my head, though, because there's so much going on. I need to outsource it to the cloud. But apart from that,
It's coming.
I definitely want to have a whiskey with you, the human.
Oh no, we're going to do that for sure.
The human, you, not the AI, you.
So Nick, I just want to thank you for all of your great insights and perspective. I appreciate the vast place you come from and looking at all the ways to integrate humanity, AI, social impact. You really encapsulate a lot of what this program is really about. What are your final words for those listening around what you see is most important? Once again, what this pandemic is really revealing for all of us right now, what are the questions that we need to be asking in terms of our relationship to AI and AI's relationship to us and the greater environment as a whole?
Yeah. So to Af's point earlier, learn everything you can about AI. If you're in the domain, educate, teach. But what I'd like to end with is to create better AI, to create ethical AI, we need to create better humans and more ethical humans, and have that that imparting of values sort of flow from parents to school to tutors, mentors, coaches, professors, venture capitalists, funders, everyone that interacts with anyone that's kind of moving on the path of creating the next level of AI that's going to make a big impact in our lives. Let's empower them to not only be smarter, but have the right values that are going to carry us into the next echelon of artificial intelligence.
I absolutely love that. And that's actually my biggest takeaway also, is that yes, there's bias in AI, but we have to take responsibility of the source of that bias.
Correct.
And so the more that we take responsibility for our consciousness, our biases, all the ways that we need to develop and grow and keep ourselves in check, AI is going to only be a better extension of that, depending on how we do our own work and how we continue to show up.
Yep. Well said.
So thank you so much again, all of you, for being part of this amazing conversation. We hope all of you out there enjoyed it. Please continue to send us your questions. You'll see these posts on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. And we'll be sending the replay out tomorrow. So feel free to pass that on to anyone that you think would be inspired by this conversation. Nick, we'd love to have you back again at some point soon to continue the conversation.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
You're so wonderful. So thank you again. And then for next week, we're going to be inviting Anthony Woolley. And so we're going to be looking at how to reset your career and embrace digital. He has a pretty incredible story about this personally and some of the obstacles he's had to overcome to re-examine a very cushy career into the very uncomfortable unknown and make friends with that. And then how to embrace digital along the way. that's changing the game that I think a lot of you will be able to relate to in different ways. So that's our show next week. Same time, same channel. Nick, thank you again.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
All the best. Have a great day, guys.
Okay. Be well.
Likewise. Bye-bye.